Okay, we've talked, visiting and kind of, the multi, I don't want to say multi, the dual type of culture that's there with the German influence and the French influence. But, you know, why is that? What's the history of this area? Why
Mm.
does it have this mix of culture from the German and the French?
Yeah, and a third part of that would be the Swiss.
Okay,
So
really?
because it's downstream from Switzerland. So the Rhine River flows out of Switzerland into Alsace and heads north. And by many accounts, a lot of the Alsatian heritage can trace its roots and lineage back actually to Switzerland,
Oh,
which
wow.
is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But it is uniquely its own thing. I will say that. It's they are loyal to France. They'll root for the French soccer team when they play. And there's a recent history with Germany in World War II that is still pretty painful. I think for a lot of multi-generational families. But nonetheless, it's that location being right on the Rhine River, being kind of in this area. It's if you're familiar with Italian wine and Italian regions, it's really not that different from Alto Adige or from Friuli, where you have, there's some zones like this in Europe where the borders don't really mean a ton.
Right.
There's so much of a gray area between cultures, and Alsace is really that. It's things have just been blending for so long that it's formed its own unique identity. Viticulture in the area does date back to the Romans. So the first evidence of vines producing for wine goes back to 2 AD. So we're talking
Wow.
very, very far back. I was reading up on this morning from the Wine Scholar Guild manual, and there was a quote in there that in the 9th century there were documented 160 different villages were producing wine in Alsace. So the industry by the 9th century was large enough that you had wines being produced, kind of across the whole Vosges mountain range. And really, it reached a prestige peak in the 1500s. It was really the world's most prestigious wine at that time. It's been a celebrated wine for a long time. It just maybe hasn't had the same kind of track record with America like Champagne has, or like Burgundy or Bordeaux has. But it's a very well regarded and prestigious wine region that had some very difficult times in the 20th century that it had to recover from, that maybe those other wine regions didn't have nearly as much of a hill to climb, to be quite honest. So, that's kind of, if you fast forward from the 1500s to modern times, you see that Alsace went back and forth between Germany and France several times. I actually had to write this down because I thought it was so interesting. So in the 17th century, Louis XIV annexed it from Germany into France. So that's the 17th century. And then the late 1700s, the French Revolution, the Napoleonic Wars that kind of followed, that really destabilizes the region. And then it's reclaimed by Germany in 1871. And then after World War I, it goes back to France. And then Nazi Germany invades in World War II and occupies it for a duration of World War II. And then it's liberated and it goes back to France again. So Alsace was in a tug of war there for a period of time from 1871 to 1945, where it went back and forth. And the uncertainty that came from that, the trauma that came from that, really formulated, the modern identity of Alsace in many ways. And so after that war, when you had so much of the infrastructure destroyed, and you wanted to rebound with the viticulture of the area, it was natural for them to embrace industrialization by doing so. And I think as a result of that, it built the industry back up, but it really kind of had to pivot back towards fine wines, terroir-centric wines, less industrial wines. And that's been kind of the trajectory of the wine region, is going back into more of a traditional mindset, back towards more of a handcrafted wine scene that's really quite robust at this time. But yeah, it's interesting, when you go to Alsace, Rob, and you tour some of these villages, one village will have just a spectacular church steeple crowning it that is clearly several hundred years old. And then another church will look like it's brand new. The steeple will look brand new. And you come to find out that at the close of World War II, a lot of American bombers targeted the churches and the church steeples because that's where the Nazi snipers were. as the American troops advanced to liberate Alsace. And so it was an unfortunate sacrifice to liberate Alsace. Was to the icon of each village was destroyed in many instances. And so there does appear to be a lot of stories that I've heard from wineries that my great grandfather he made it to America and he thanked so and so who liberated, met him in person. And so there's kind of this camaraderie that Alsace has with America that's tied to the end of World War II. That's kind of interesting. That I've just seen flashes of. I'm no expert on it by any means, but it's certainly part of this, the wonderful story and the tapestry of this region's history. That kind of you can actually visibly see it when you're there, which is kind of interesting.
Well, and you mentioned, the back and forth during the war. It wasn't just that they wanted to gain more land, right? This is a strategic location with the mountains and the river that runs down.
River, yeah.
That this was a for military reasons. They wanted this area for access across the border into France and into Germany.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And, I think, and predating that, there was a lot of treasure to be had in having this, this wine region under your belt as an empire.